The State Forest Nursery in Ames is part of the Iowa Department of Natural Resources. The site was selected and the original buildings constructed by the Civilian Conservation Corps in the 1930s. Irrigation water was obtained from the adjacent Skunk River, and the first crop of nursery stock was harvested in 1935. In the early 1940s, the State Conservation Commission took over operation of the nursery from the CCC and used it as a distribution point for trees used in state parks. This activity was interrupted by World War II. After the war, the Conservation Commission resumed its activities. The first college graduate to manage the facility was Gene Hertel. He was succeeded in 1964 by Jerry Grebash, the present manager. The goal of the State Forest Nursery is to provide plants for conservation planting activities across the state of Iowa. The primary objectives are reforestation, establishing wildlife habitat, and controlling erosion. In order to achieve these objectives, landowners are asked to agree to specific requirements. The nursery controls the species available, and the minimum order is for 500 plants. Planting intentions must be stated so that the nursery can exercise some management of the plantings. An agreement must be signed stating that plants will not be resold with roots attached. Permitted uses include cut Christmas trees and using trees for lumber and other wood products. Plants cannot be used for nursery stock. From 23 to 26 species are usually grown by the State Forest Nursery. The primary species are some of the most important tree and shrub species in the state, such as white pine, black walnut, Scotch pine, red oak, red osier dogwood, nine bark, green ash, white ash, and silver maple. The stock is used for reforestation and Christmas tree and lumber production. Located just south of Ames, the main nursery site has 50 of its 98 acres in seed beds. In addition to the main nursery, there is a satellite nursery near Fort Madison, where 35 of the 50 acres available are devoted to seed beds. Because of the sandy soil there, conifers make up the bulk of the production. 1/3 of the total nursery stock production is grown at Fort Madison. There are 7 phases in a successful nursery program: seed collection and seed storage, seed bed preparation, planting, spring or fall, germination, maintenance of the seed bed, harvesting, and seedling storage and shipment. Seeds are obtained from 3 sources. Nursery crews sometimes gather seed in the wild. All hardwood seeds are purchased at buying stations set up in places like the Yellow River Forest or from county conservation boards across Iowa. Local collectors bring baskets of seeds into these stations. Seeds are accrued with little regard to sowing schedule because woody plants do not produce good seed crops each year. The key factor is that the seed be locally produced so that it is genetically adapted to the climate. The third source for seed is from commercial seed dealers, both national and local. For example, seed for conifers typically comes from the east, and that for ponderosa pine comes from the Black Hills. After collection, seeds need to be sorted and cleaned. Nut seeds like oak will be sown as is, but seeds from other species need to be separated from leaves, stems, and chaff. Berries need to be crushed and dried before a fanning mill separates the seed. After sorting, they are placed in sealed containers and stored at 26 degrees Fahrenheit and less than 10% moisture content. These conditions reduce seed respiration to preserve the energy stored in the storage tissues of the seed. This maintains storage life, which may be many years. Prior to planting, the temperature is raised to above freezing. Some seeds are not well suited for storage. The State Forest Nursery uses nearly 7,000 bushels of black walnut seed annually. Long-term storage for this amount of seed and for other nut seeds is impractical. Other types of seeds, such as silver maple, cannot be stored at all because they will germinate when mature. Operations at the State Forest Nursery are carried out much like those in any garden plot, only on a much larger scale. The similarities extend from the way seeds are planted to how the land is tilled. Prior to seeding, a cover crop and organic matter are rototilled into the seed beds. Then a soil analysis is performed to determine nutrient levels and how much nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium are needed. Because a nursery harvests the entire plant, top, stem, and root, it is very important to replace the nutrients which are removed. Tests are also made to see if damping off disease pathogens are at a level high enough to warrant fumigation. At $1,200 to $1,300 per acre, fumigation is an expensive operation, but so far, one that has not been required here. Planting takes place either in fall or spring. Most northern-grown seeds come out of dormancy only after a process called stratification has taken place. Stratification is a cool, moist period, which can take place while seeds are in storage. The cool, moist period need not be the length of a winter. It occurs naturally when seeds are sown in the fall. Such seeds will lie dormant until spring. Spring-sown seeds, such as silver maple, do not need a cold storage period and germinate right away. Chokecherry is an example of a species which has a requirement for a long, cool, moist period in order to break dormancy. Germination for chokecherry is published as being 120 to 160 days. On the other hand, fresh red pine seed will germinate in less than 14 days. Germination is determined by a seed test. First-year survival rates are determined by the history of the seed lot and the species. The ratio of survivors to seeds planted for the previous year's crop determines how many seeds per linear foot will be planted. The State Forest Nursery staff uses a 16-foot rototiller to prepare the top 4 to 5 inches of soil in the seed beds, and they can till up to 10 acres a day. Although this destroys some of the soil structure, it is necessary in order to provide a good site for seeding and for the promotion of vigorous plant growth. Wind and water damage in winter is controlled by growing a cover crop, such as oats or winter wheat in the open areas. On the nursery beds, ground corn cobs are used to reduce erosion. Specialized equipment is needed at nurseries like the State Forest Nursery. This Love Oyard planter takes seed from a single hopper and sows 6 rows at a time. It is capable of seeding up to 8 rows at once. Some seeds are broadcast over the surface of the seed bed. Nut seeds, such as oak and walnut, are spread using a sand spreader-like unit. They are then rolled into the soil. A layer of ground corn cobs is spread over the top of the seed and is then pressed down with a roller to place the seeds at the correct planting depth. The fruits of nut-bearing trees contain within them a large quantity of stored food. This gives them a high potential for fast initial growth. These walnut seedlings emerged 4 days ago. 3 weeks after emerging, they had already grown to a height of 6 to 10 inches. Another method of propagation is that of taking hardwood cuttings. This method is used extensively in the production of poplars. During winter, the whip of last year's growth is cut off and brought indoors. Here it is cut into 7-inch lengths. The cutting is planted in spring with one bud above the soil. The poplar cuttings shown here are 11 days old and will grow to about 7 feet by fall. They were selected based on rapid growth rate and disease resistance. At the end of the growing season, they will be dug and topped, leaving the root system and a 6-inch stub, which is called a rooted cutting. The leftover whips are used as cuttings for the next crop. A corn cob mulch is used exclusively at the State Forest Nursery. Some nurseries use sawdust, but this can create nutrient problems as it decomposes. And sawdust tends to get strewn around by wind and rain. Whole cobs are ground in a tub grinder designed for making feed from baled hay. The tub grinder empties into a hammer mill for a final grinding. They are then ready for spreading as a mulch. Even though Iowa's climate usually provides an adequate annual rainfall, a high-value, high-density crop, such as the seedlings grown here, require irrigation to ensure germination and steady growth. Well water is distributed through underground pipes to an overhead sprinkler system. Irrigation usually takes place early or late in the day to take advantage of calm air. This helps reduce evaporation losses and results in a more even distribution of the water for the plants. In the early stages of development, plant requirements are about 1/2 inch of water per week. At 8 to 10 weeks of age, the requirement goes up to 1 inch per week. The usual application is about 1/2 inch of water per spraying. Actual needs are governed by the water-holding capacity of the soil. For example, the sandy soils at Fort Madison drain more quickly than the loamy soils at Ames, and thus need to be irrigated more often. By mid-August, irrigation is reduced to promote dormancy. Unless the weather is unusual, irrigation stops in September. Overhead irrigation has a number of drawbacks. About 20% of the water is lost to evaporation. Runoff causes a certain amount of erosion. Overhead irrigation is being replaced in some applications by drip irrigation because water losses have been shown to be much less. Because of the very shallow root system of the nursery crop, only a small amount of nitrogen can be efficiently utilized. Granular ammonium nitrate is therefore broadcast about 6 times each season. An application is followed by irrigation, which helps prevent burning of plant tissue by the fertilizer, which might become lodged in the needle or leaf. Windbreaks reduce air movement across nursery beds. This cuts down on wind erosion and evaporation. The still air also aids germination and helps prevent seedling desiccation or drying out by keeping warm, moist air near the plants. As in the case of planting, harvesting takes place in spring and fall. Digging equipment of various designs is used to lift seedlings from the seed bed. It is then up to the work crew to quickly remove the seedlings before sunlight and drying cause damage. Many temporary workers are employed at harvest, and their safety is a factor of prime concern. A training program acquaints them with the equipment they will use. This homemade lifter, patterned after an old John Deere potato digger, is used in harvesting plants which have taproots. A blade passes about 6 inches under the soil surface. A deeper pass would be preferable, but is not practical because of the extra power that would be required and the limited clearance on the lifter. The chain separates the seedlings from the bed and drops them behind, where workers quickly pick them up. The seedlings are placed in polyethylene bags in wire cages and taken to short-term storage, where they are cooled to about 38 degrees. The Graco seedling lifter works well on plants like these 3-year-old white pines. Compared with the other machine, it is slower and cannot dig as deeply. but it is less labor-intensive. The seedlings are lifted onto a conveyor, which shakes most of the soil from the plants by the time they reach the rear. As before, the seedlings are placed in a bag in a cage and sent to storage for cooling. Grading takes place in this room. The plants are brought in from cold storage where they have been kept cool. They are placed on conveyors which travel past the graders. Only one grade per species is used at the State Forest Nursery. The graders also look for root and insect damage. Groups of 5 good seedlings are placed on a second conveyor. 10 groups of 5 are bundled together to reach the nursery's base unit of 50 plants per plastic bag. In the past, graders counted to 20 plants, but recounts became a problem. Reducing the count to 5 increased production and accuracy by 25%. Over 3 million plants are graded annually, so an increase in efficiency like this can be quite important because of the labor-intensive nature of the work. During the packaging operation, 10 bundles of 5 plants are packaged in heat-sealed bags, along with a squirt of water. The graded and labeled bags are placed in the familiar wire baskets, which can be collapsed for storage. The clear bags allow for one last inspection before packing for shipment. The packaged plants are then stored in one of the two 61,000 cubic foot coolers. These coolers can hold 50% of the nursery's annual harvest. The paper bags seen here are ready for shipment. The clear bags with labels are will call orders, which will be picked up at the nursery. 85% of all orders are shipped via UPS. The shipping label identifies the order for the packers and serves as a packing slip for the recipient. Instructions for planting and weed control are included in each order. Fall dug materials are stored from December to March at 26 degrees Fahrenheit. About 2 weeks prior to shipment, they are warmed to 38 degrees. Spring dug plants are in the cooler at 38 degrees for only a few weeks until the April shipments begin. The full cycle of lifting, grading, sorting, and shipping typically covers only a 3-week period in the spring. Although other tap-rooted species are harvested in fall, walnuts are left until spring because the nursery has had poor results from overwinter storage in the cooler. With the shipping of several million plants in April, the cycle of seed bed preparation, planting, irrigation and fertilization, harvesting, grading, packaging, and shipping is ready to start once again.